All right, happy Saturday, everybody. I hadn't put out a podcast for a while, and so, I've been doing videos and stuff. I still may do a video later, I don't know. But I've been working on stuff. I've been trying to learn doing 3D graphics and stuff like that, and so it's not easy. And there's a lot of learning involved, so I've been working on that in the mornings. That's why one reason I've been getting videos out so late. But I've been wanting to do this podcast for about 3 or 4 days, so I figured that, I go ahead and do it. What I'm going to be talking about today is why I decided to get into police work. And it's kind of a combination podcast and story time with Kevin type of thing, because it could be either or, but I just decided to make it into a podcast. I mean, there's not a whole lot of difference, other than on the story time I'm usually on camera, and I didn't feel like being on camera today. So partly why I'm doing it as a podcast, so I can just, kick back and, not to worry about being on camera and the lighting and all that. So anyway, this is the Kevin and Copper podcast, so Copper's got him a bone over there, and so this microphone picks up everything so well. So if he's over there starts chewing on his bone, you're going to hear it. He was just a second ago when I was testing out my mic, and now I guess he's gotten bored with it. I need to get him some more. I am going to the store here in a little bit. As soon as I get done with uploading this, I'm going to take off. I got to go get some groceries. Well, anyway, let me quit rambling and get to the point. Now, I'm not doing this to try to refute anybody that says I wasn't a cop or whatever. If they're saying that I wasn't a cop, then they just haven't done the research. Because, like I've said before, I worked for 5 different departments. If they can't find information on that, and it was a long time ago. I mean, I started back in 1975. So, in a lot of places, their records only go back as far as 1980, so you're not going to find records on me. Although I did work for the U.S. Attorney's Office in around 2003, so that should be readily available. But I'd gotten out of police work in 1980 and didn't get back into it for another 20 years. So anyway, so I just thought this might be of interest to people. Some might be interested in it, some might not. And of course, you have the option to listen or not listen. So, that's, if you're interested in it, you can listen to it. I think it's interesting, but that's me, because it's about me, but then I enjoy storytelling. Anyway, let me shut up and quit rambling. And also, my mouth is so dry. Let me get a drink of water. Okay. So, I graduated from high school back in 1975. I had a friend who was actually a year behind me in school. I don't remember exactly how he ended up with the position, but he started dispatching at the local police department. Now, they no longer have a dispatch. They disbanded it years ago, and now everybody dispatches out of the 911 center at the sheriff's office. So everyone in the county, all the different police departments. Of course, Payette, where I lived and worked, was the only town that had their own dispatch. The other towns were much smaller, and so they already dispatched out of the sheriff's office. But anyway, I had a friend that worked at the local police department, and I was kind of interested in police work simply because my mom was, for years and years, my mom was the head of magistrate court for Piatt County. And she started out as a clerk and ended up being offered the position to take the whole thing over. And that was, for the office gals. And well, she was basically second in command right underneath the judge. There was the judge, and then, there was her. And, although it seemed at times they were on equal footing because a lot of times she told him what to do. But he trusted her judgment. So, it wasn't one of those, you need to do this. She would make suggestions, and he found out that she was usually right. So, well, anyway, she was, worked at the courthouse. Now, the high school was not very far from the courthouse and the elementary school. I don't remember exactly when Mom went to work there. I don't remember if I was still in grade school or if I was in junior high. Because if I had been in junior high, I'd been on the other side of town. But I used to walk over there after school, and it must have been my freshman year I'm thinking of, because my sophomore year I had a car. But I'd walk over there. I didn't feel like walking home because it was like a mile walk. And to get out of school, like 3:30, Mom got off at 5, so I just go over there and hang around. Plus it was kind of fun too, because I got to know all the lawyers, and I got to know, a lot of the cops and stuff like that. And so I'd been around it, and Mom let me go to, there were some different trials that I went to, I got to go in and watch all the proceedings and everything, and I found that pretty fascinating. Some of the stories that you'd hear, because, in small town America like this, you get some of the most stupid crap, but, I go over there and watch the trials and all that good stuff. And, just got hanging around it, and got really interested in it. And I remember telling Mom, I said, I'd really like to get into police work. But for whatever reason, she and Dad were trying to talk me out of it, and they thought that I should go be a teacher. I don't know why. Now, I am a good teacher. I've taught a lot. I've taught, Sunday school. I've taught, filled in the substitute teacher in public school, taught in Christian school. So I am a good teacher, but it's not something I wanted to do. Put up with a room full of 30 kids 8 hours a day. That just wasn't my cup of tea. And I actually ended up going to teachers college, and as soon as I got into student teaching, that told me that my original idea that I didn't want to be a teacher was true. And it didn't last very long. But anyway, I digress. So, they were trying to talk me into being a teacher. Mom didn't want me to get into police work. And I don't really know why. Honestly, don't. And I didn't even understand it back then. It's like, why don't you just let me do what I want to do? And parents, let me just say, if your kids have a desire to do something, regardless of how crazy it may seem to you, if it's their dream, unless it's like being a stripper or something like that, well, use common sense. But, if they have a dream to do something, don't discourage them, encourage them, and if they may lose interest in it, just naturally, but don't try to talk them out of it. Don't dampen their hopes. Don't dampen their dreams. I think it's good if a kid has a dream and has desires to reach a goal. That's never a bad thing. That's always a good thing. And so, let them do it. And like I say, if it may not work out, and and a lot of things don't work out. A lot of things didn't work out for you and I, just not a natural everyday basis. We don't always accomplish everything that we set out to accomplish. Things don't always go our way. So, and it's going to be the same way. They've got to learn the hard way sometimes, just like you and I did. Now there are some things where you can say, hey, don't make the same mistakes I did. But you know how it is. Your parents told you the same thing, and their parents told them, and we all had to make our own mistakes and find our own way. And we all had to learn the hard way. Maybe not in everything, but in some things, it's just the way it is. It's just life. So anyway, my parents were trying to talk me out of, being a cop, but, I'm like, nah, I don't care what they say. That's what I want to do. So when I graduated from high school, I enrolled at the local community college the next year, and my major was police science, which was some very fascinating classes. I ended up changing my major later to psychology after I went back to school, years later. But directly out of high school, I majored in police science. And what was really cool was all of the classes were not taught by college professors who just have book learning. You got a lot of educated idiots that they've learned everything that they know out of books, but as far as real life experience, they're dumber than a brick. So all of the classes in the police science curriculum were either taught by police officers or attorneys. Some defense attorneys, some prosecuting attorneys. And of course, we even had the chief of police teaching a couple of classes, which made it very interesting because they cut out all the bullshit, right? They didn't, your textbook says this, but you know how that goes. Yeah, your textbook says this, but most of the time the textbooks were pretty good. They just didn't have all the detail that a live person was able to share with you. And a lot of the classes were extremely, I still remember some of them vividly. There was this one class taught by this attorney, and it was like we went on and on and on. And basically he went in a progressive manner, just like the case did. And of course, we're trying to figure out what happened. And of course, then finally on the last day, he gave us the answer of what they found out. And it was just like, it was kind of like watching one of those series on TV where it gets right to a good part. And it's like, to be continued next week. And you're like, oh, crap, no. So, yeah, it's the way some of the classes were. They were awesome. So anyway, I didn't intend to go into that much detail, but hey, whatever. I'm just going with the flow. I'm going wherever my heart leads me in this. So, well, anyway, I was, majoring in police science. And one of the things that they said was, if you can get a job with, one of the local police departments, there wasn't that many. We're talking maybe 2 or 3 small ones. But anytime you can get life experience and actually being in it, take advantage of it. So anyway, I was talking with Dan, who was my friend, who was the one who was a year behind me in school. And, he was dispatching for the police department. And he told me one day, I don't even remember how it all came about, but we were talking about it, and he said, you should go apply. And he says, with everybody knows your mom and all that stuff, he says he'd probably give you a leg up on everybody else, which actually it did. Very much so. So anyway, a lot of times it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? But in this case, it was kind of a little bit of both. So anyway, I put in my application, and they called me in for an interview, I think, or did they? No, actually, more I think about it, God, we're talking, this is back in 1975, people, so I'm trying to remember, I'm trying to remember an interview, and I don't remember going on an interview, which is kind of what's surprising when I got the job. So, yeah, I don't think I did go on an interview, couldn't think of it. I thought, I started to say I did because, normally that's the process, but I don't think I did. And anyway, probably mostly because he knew my mom really well. So, well, anyway, this particular time, I'd been playing the drums for a while, and I'd actually, my junior and senior year, I made quite a bit of money playing drums. But what I would do is I would go and play with Dad. So instead of, him having to hire a drummer, he'd just have me come drum because I was a pretty good drummer. And, and pay me $100, or sometimes I'd even get like $200, And so the only thing I didn't like about it was I was a rocker, I was into, Creedence Clearwater and Grand Funk Railroad and Leonard Skinner and Steppenwolf, Three Dog Night, Led Zeppelin, so all those bands, that were, those of you my age, we all grew up with. And I didn't like country music, and Dad played in the country music that Dad played isn't like the country music that you see today. We're talking the, Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard and Marty Robbins and George Jones and God, I don't know. Dad's got like a record collection that's just like, it was all that stuff that I hated because to me that was like old people music, and I didn't like it. I still don't really like the old stuff that much. I really don't. I don't mind some of the new stuff like Brad Paisley and some of the, because it's kind of almost like a soft rock used to be, But so anyway, so I was going and playing these dances, but I was making really good money. And we would play a lot of like senior citizens dances, and every year Dad's band would play for the police party. They always have a party around Christmas time. And, all the different departments would get together and they'd have, this get together and party. And they'd usually rent, like I remember one year they rented the Armory. I remember I played there. This particular year, they had rented the Senior Citizen Center downtown. So anyway, I was down there with Dad playing the drums, and, we're just, so I go in, and of course I see the chief of police there, and I want a job. And so I walk up, shake his hand, hey, how you doing? Right? He didn't say anything then. Well, anyway, we we'd play for 2 hours and take like a 15, 20 minute break or whatever, go take a whiz and whatever we had to do. And then we'd play another 2 hours. It was usually 4 hour set is what you'd usually do at these dances. And I think we did the full 4 hours there. I don't remember. Hey, like I said, it was 1975. So it was like, all I remember was about halfway through, we took a break, and I'm sitting there, I go over and sit down. I went over and sat down with Mom. There was some cops and stuff. And of course, Ron, who was the chief of police, Ron Goff, if anybody wants to look it up, he was the chief of police in 1975. So we're sitting there at the table, and all of a sudden he looks over at me and he goes, oh, by the way, Kevin, he says, you start on the desk on Monday. Huh? Okay. So this was in December 1975. Like, well, I'll say it was Christmas party. So, duh. Anyway, so I don't remember what day, but I know it was December 1975 that I started at Payette Police Department. And dispatching. So, anyway, that's how I got into police work, started out dispatching. And I would always, another thing too, let me digress a little bit. Before I got the job, Mom was able to set it up where I could ride with some of the officers. And initially started riding with some of the deputies. And I would go like on the weekends. I'd go like on Friday or Saturday night and ride with the deputies, right? So I was showing a real interest in it, but I wasn't doing that to get a job. I was doing it because I had fun. It was really cool. I enjoyed the heck out of it. And that was I didn't have an ulterior motive for doing that. I just thought it was great. It was a lot of fun. So I'd been doing that for a while. So, I'd been showing a really interest in it. And of course, the more I rode with the deputies, the more interested I was getting in being an officer. And then, so then by the time that they hired me, I was already, full blown, wanting to be a cop. And so I was dispatching at the local police department and was also going to class. And I was working graveyards. Boy, and that was some fun trying to, work 8 hours a night. I think I was working I wasn't working full time at that point. I was working, but I was still working like 3 or 4 nights a week. And, so I was, working graveyard and then trying to take notes the next day in class, then having to go back to work that night, trying to get some sleep, and of course, noisy house with people doing stuff and going in and out. And, that was a tough period, let me tell you. So I was glad when school finally ended and then I could just concentrate on work. And I didn't end up going back to school the next year because I figured, hey, I've already got a job in police work, I've learned some basics, and I just don't want to be dealing with going to class and then working nights, and then by that time I'd been hired full time. So I was working, 5 and sometimes 6 and 7 nights a week with people. Somebody called in sick or whatever. They call me and say, hey, can you fill in? Yep. So, and that was just one of the most joyful times of my life. We used to have so much fun. We just did. It's like you got to know all the cops. And of course, everybody always come over there and hang out. We'd, a lot of times, about half the night, we'd have a squad room of cops. One or two people show up, then you'd have, a couple more or whatever, and even the guys from other towns would, get bored, and so they'd stop by, and we had a pop machine, a candy machine, and a snack machine, so it was like, and then at that particular time we had, I'm trying to think, there's Dan, then there was another Kevin, then Mark, my best friend. He ended up getting hired as a dispatcher, and me, and one other guy who I can't remember. Well, then there was a couple of guys too around our same age that worked at the sheriff's office. So we would go a lot of times during the week. We'd get off and party because once we turned 19, at that particular time, the drinking age in Idaho was 19 years old. They later changed it to 21, but back then, the drinking age was 19. So you could actually be a cop at 19 years old too. Because I got sworn in when I was 19 years old, even though I wasn't necessarily out on the road yet. So anyway, I worked there here. I still live in Payette. Will until I take off for Arizona. But worked there for a couple of years. Well, then I heard that they had an opening up in Weiser, Idaho, which is about 12 miles north of here. They had an opening at the sheriff's office there. And of course, the sheriff there, Jim Johnston, at that particular time, was in the Army with my dad, and they were good buddies. And so I remember telling Mom and Dad, saying, hey, they've got an opening at the sheriff's office that pays quite a bit more. It paid, quite a bit, almost double what I was making for a deputy position, right? And of course I wanted to be a cop, didn't want to stay a dispatcher all my life. So, it's like, they've got an opening up there. And my dad goes, oh, Jim and I were in the Army together. So, tell him that, you don't want to tell him that, you're my kid. But I didn't really feel right doing that. I don't like name dropping. So I don't walk in there. Oh yeah, hire me because you were in the Army with my dad. Well, thing is, when I went in to turn in, I went up there and I got an application. This is back in the days they didn't just send you to a kiosk or tell you to apply online. You didn't have it online. So I fill out the application. Then Mom tells me, she goes, now you make sure and you don't drop it off in the evening. You drop it off during the day when he's going to be there. Talking about Jim, the sheriff. I was like, okay. So which was good advice, as it turned out. So I go up there and Jim just happens to be standing there at the counter, shooting the breeze with everybody, So I go walking up and I said, hi, I'm applying for your deputy position here. And it was a dispatcher and deputy position where you dispatch and then you would fill in like on vacations and sick days and whatever, So usually, during the week I dispatch and then on the weekends, I patrol, a lot of times. So, it wasn't being a full-time cop yet, but at least I was going to go out. I was actually out on the road quite a bit there, as it turned out. But anyway, I'm chasing rabbit trails here. So anyway, I go and Jim's standing there at the counter, and I go, yeah, I said, I'm applying for your deputy position, and handed him my application. He looks at it and he goes, Kevin Neese. He looks at me and he goes, you in relation to Bob? Robert? And I go, yeah, it's my dad. Really? I knew right then I had the job. Because then, several times during the interview, he'd be talking, about the job. Then he'd just kind of look at me and he'd go, Bob Neese's boy. Man, oh man, Bob Neese's boy. And he must have said that, I don't know how many times during while we were talking. And I think that was another situation too, where he didn't even call me in for an interview. He just called me and offered me the job. So, I got back home and Mom asked me how it went. And I told her what I just got through telling you guys. And she goes, so you got the job. Don't even worry about it. You got the job. And sure enough, it was like a couple days later, I think, if I remember right, that he called me and said, yeah, I'd like you to come to work. All right. So I went in and put my 2-week notice in here, And so I went up there and, as it turns out, it was the most delightful place to work. It was like stepping back in time going up there, because it's just a bunch of, put it this way. The first call that I went on as a deputy was somebody's sheep got out of the fence and was harassing their cows. This other person's cows. And it was the person whose cows were getting harassed that called. And I was like, when they gave me the call, I'm like, sheep can harass cows? And I guess it can be kind of mean. I didn't realize that because we're talking, this is like rural America, people. This is like Mayberry, and I tell you what, it's the closest thing to Mayberry you'll ever find. And I don't know, well, not so much now, but this was back in 1977 when I went to work there. And, because I'd worked at PAD a couple of years. So anyway, got the job there, and I should have stayed there. It was, like I say, it was the most delightful place to work. Jim was the greatest guy to work for. All my coworkers were just awesome. I loved it there, but I wanted to be a full-time cop. And to be honest with you, I don't know how things would have turned out. I don't know how life would have turned out as far as the different twists and turns that I ended up taking that I wouldn't have taken if I'd have stayed there. And so I don't know whether it would have been good or bad, but I regret leaving there. I really do. I really wish, if I could go back and do it over, I would have stayed there, and just waited, been patient. But I've never been known as being a patient person. So, anyway, I'd been working there a couple of years. Had a guy who moved to Weiser and took over as the head of the local ambulance, and his name was Mike Walker. And anyway, he'd always stop in, shoot the breeze, stuff like that. Got to know him, and he was from Rexburg, Idaho, which is on the other side of the state. And so he was there. I don't remember how long he was there, maybe a year. Well, anyway, he got the same job offer at Rexburg for their ambulance service, and that was where he was from. That was where his wife was from, and so he decided to go back over there, which I hated because he's a really cool guy, and we got along really well, and the guy that they hired to replace him was kind of a dweeb, but anyway, so I don't know, we ended up talking before he left, and I said, hey, and I was just kind of like saying it, just to say it. And I go, hey, if you ever police department or whatever over there has any openings, let me know. He goes, okay. And you don't think anything about it because people always tell you, okay, and then, they never act on it. Well, in this particular case, he did. I don't remember how long it was after he went back there. I don't think it was a real super long time, maybe a month or two. It could have been 6 months. I don't know. Anyway, I get a phone call, and it's Mike. He says, hey, I just thought I'd let you know that they have an opening here at the police department. Really? Yeah. He says the chief's name is Blair, and he says, I've already kind of talked to him about you. I've mentioned you. And he said, well, yeah, have him get a hold of me. Okay, cool. So anyway, I call, and I go over there for an interview. And, I thought it went, fairly well, whatever. You never know, because there's been times I thought I really nailed an interview and didn't get hired. And then there's been other times where I thought the interview went totally horrible. And I've been right on a few of those too, the ones that went totally horrible, that I'm like, I ain't going to get this damn job. But there's been a few of them that I thought that and ended up getting hired. So anyway, I get home, and, I don't remember how long it was after I got home. It wasn't very long, maybe a day or two, I think. I could be wrong. Hell, I don't know. But anyway, they called me and offered me a job. And I'm like, okie dokie. So anyway, I ended up going over there. And that's where I met, if you remember my one video I did where I talk about the Mormon gal that I met. That's where I met her. And I actually met her going on a call one night. They used to be Rick's College. I think it's BYU something now. But back then it was Rick's College. It has a Mormon college there in Rexburg. And there's a lot of housing and apartments and stuff like that that's about 90% college students. It's not all college students, but it's mostly college student housing. You always got a bunch of, people that live together or whatever. So anyway, I don't remember Randy, Randy, who I used to hang around with a lot, on our days off and stuff. Randy Hatterley. We went on this one call at this college complex. And there was a bunch of kids standing outside, a bunch of college kids standing outside. And I'm standing there talking to him, and all of a sudden, out of my peripheral vision, there's somebody comes walking up there, and she goes, "Kevin!" And I'm like, what? Who knows me over here other than, my coworkers and stuff? Well, anyway, it turned out to be one of my cousins that she had turned Mormon, and, my cousin Kelly, she turned Mormon. And anyway, so we were talking a little bit about, hey, what you been doing? Da, 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 da. So anyway, we go back across the street to this other apartment complex, and basically we're reading these guys the riot act, telling them they better, settle it down or whatever. Well, anyway, we're talking to the girls that made the complaint, and one of them was Peggy, who later ended up dating, and, I call her my fiance. We were kind of like borderline engaged. We were talking about getting married, but we hadn't really ever made it official. But we were about, a micro centimeter, from doing it, So anyway, we start talking to these gals, and so I don't remember. I think we got their phone numbers in case we needed to contact them, and it was legit, since they called in the complaints. We got, in a notebook, we got their names and phone numbers and stuff like that, and said, okay, well, if we need anything else from you, blah, blah, blah. Well, one gal that I was talking to, of course, Peggy, it's like, she seems really, she's a good looking dude, good looking blonde hair, blue eyes, and her eyes were like dreamy. Anyway, so, anyway, threw me off track now, just thinking back. So we're talking, and so Randy and I, it was a couple days later, we were off duty, and we were out having a few brewskis. And we got talking about these girls we met. And I'm like, the thing is, would it be wrong for us to try to contact them for dates? It's kind of like, I don't know if that's what you consider ethical. And so I remember I actually went and talked to, I think I went and talked to the captain about it. Said, hey, we met these girls. Would it be wrong for us to ask them out? And he's like, no, they can always say no. He says, no, you met them. If you guys hit it off, he says, yeah, heck, Well, at the time, too, when I first got hired, I was the only one on the department who wasn't Mormon and the only one who wasn't married. So anyway, Randy got hired, and he wasn't married either. He was Mormon, but he was Jack Mormon. He liked his beer, but he was single. So he and I ran around because we were the only two single people on the department. So anyway, we we both talked to the captain about it, and he goes, no, I don't see any problem with it. You don't have any ulterior motive other than to take them out and get to know them, And he says, just because you met them on duty, and I actually ended up having several dates with girls that I met on calls. But they didn't really work out. It was kind of like one of those where you take them out and you're kind of like, you could tell you just didn't have any chemistry or anything, So anyway, Peggy and I started going out and ended up almost getting married. Of course, I told that story because I actually got baptized into the Mormon church. Then I ended up becoming a Christian and left the Mormon church. And of course, and her parents could see it coming, so they basically did everything they could to get me out of the picture. So anyway, this was in 1980 when I left there, and I actually came back here. And then I decided to do some other things. I ended up getting into ministry and stuff like that, and then getting back into law enforcement work, around 2000, I think it was 2003, I believe, with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So anyway, and there was some other things in between, whatever. But anyway, that I thought maybe you might find that of interest, of how, I got into police work and why I wanted to get into police work and all that good stuff. And like I say, you may find it interesting, you may find it boring and only listen to like 2 minutes of this podcast, but if any of you stuck it through to the end, you get a gold star. So, hope you enjoyed it, really do. And I got to get to the store and get some groceries so I can eat tonight, because I like to eat. Anyway, we'll talk to you later.